The boardroom was silent, save for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Alex Carter, billionaire CEO of Cartermatics Industries, sat at the head of the polished oak table, his gaze fixated on the latest quarterly reports. The data in front of him told a story of subtle discrepancies, unexplained losses, and rising expenditures that no one could fully account for. His instincts, honed over 3 decades in business, told him something was wrong. And in his world, a gut feeling was often the difference between empire and ruin. Across the table, his longtime business partner, John Maddox, was typing furiously on his tablet, seemingly oblivious to Alex's unease. John was everything Alex was not. Charismatic, easygoing, the kind of man who could charm anyone, from investors to waitstaff. They had built the company from scratch, Alex with his relentless drive, and John with his natural knack for connecting with people. But as he looked at John now, a hint of doubt crept into Alex's mind, an unease that threatened to disrupt the partnership they'd nurtured since they were fresh out of college. "John," Alex said finally, clearing his throat, "these numbers don't add up. The international accounts are showing expenses we didn't approve." He slid the report across the table, watching John's face carefully. He wanted to believe this was a mistake, maybe even a clerical error. But some part of him feared it was more than that. John barely glanced at the report, offering a dismissive shrug. "It's probably just a miscommunication. I'll have finance look into it, Alex. You know how these things go." His tone was light, reassuring, but to Alex, it sounded almost evasive. For years, he had trusted John implicitly. They'd navigated countless challenges together, survived economic downturns, and emerged as leaders in their industry. They knew each other's strengths and weaknesses better than most brothers knew their own. But now, Alex felt the uneasy sensation that he was being kept in the dark, that John was hiding something beneath his usual charm. He let the conversation drop, but the feeling lingered, growing heavier with each passing hour. By the time Alex returned to his office, his mind was already racing, replaying every recent interaction with John, searching for clues that he might have missed. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but his instincts told him that he needed answers. The stakes were too high to ignore the signals, faint as they might be. That evening, as Alex sat alone in his dimly lit study, he opened his laptop and began a search for private investigators. He was meticulous, reviewing each firm, reading client testimonials, and looking for someone he could trust. After an hour of scrolling, he found Sam Brooks, a former police detective with a reputation for discretion and a track record of solving even the murkiest of cases. The next morning, Alex met with Sam in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe. Sam was a serious-looking man, mid-40s, with a face lined from years of chasing down cases. As he listened to Alex's concerns, he took careful notes, his piercing blue eyes narrowing as he picked up on Alex's reluctance to accuse his friend outright. "So you think there's something more than just financial discrepancies?" Sam asked, his tone neutral, his pen hovering over his notepad. Alex hesitated. How could he explain the complexity of his suspicions without sounding paranoid? He wasn't just concerned about the missing money or the bloated expenses. It was John himself, the way he'd become more secretive, more distant, and the way, lately, he seemed to dodge Alex's questions about company decisions. Alex wanted to trust him, needed to, in fact. But the numbers in John's recent evasiveness felt like a betrayal, one he wasn't ready to confront directly. "I don't know, Sam," Alex admitted, rubbing his temple. "Maybe it's nothing. But if I'm wrong about this, it could sink the company. Or worse, if it turns out John's hiding something serious, it could destroy everything we've worked for." Sam nodded, his face impassive but his eyes alight with curiosity. "I understand. I'll start with the basics. Surveillance, a look into his recent activities, his contacts. I'll keep it discreet." Alex exhaled, a mix of relief and anxiety swelling inside him. He wanted answers, but he wasn't ready for what those answers might reveal. The days stretched into weeks, with Sam's investigation progressing quietly in the background. Alex continued his work, attempting to mask his suspicion. But every interaction with John felt tense, each exchange carrying an undercurrent of distrust that hadn't been there before. He began to notice small things, John's calls taken in hushed tones, late nights at the office that didn't make sense, mysterious emails closed too quickly. And all the while, he struggled with guilt, wondering if he was the one who had changed, not John. Finally, one Friday evening, Alex received a message from Sam. Need to meet. Found something. The words sent a jolt through him. He canceled his plans and drove to Sam's office, his heart pounding as he imagined the worst-case scenarios. Embezzlement, secret offshore accounts, shady deals. He had prepared himself for a litany of possibilities. But what he saw when Sam handed him the first photograph was nothing he could have anticipated. It was John, in the dim interior of a small, unremarkable diner. Sitting across from him was a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Alex's mother. The next photo was a close-up of John, revealing details that Alex had never noticed before. Details that, when viewed with fresh eyes, were impossible to ignore. The same sharp jawline, the same gray-blue eyes, a small scar above his left eyebrow that mirrored one Alex had himself. Sam's voice was low, his words cautious. I dug deep, Alex. John was adopted when he was 10, and the records were sealed tight. But I found something. His birth name. He had another name before he was adopted. Alex gripped the edge of the table, his mind spinning as Sam spoke the name aloud. John Carter. The truth hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Alex's vision blurred as he tried to reconcile what he was hearing. His partner, his friend of 30 years, was his brother. His lost twin brother, taken away when they were just infants. And John had known all along. Alex sat in stunned silence, staring at the photographs Sam had spread out on the table. His mind raced, struggling to comprehend what he'd just learned. His partner, his confidant, the man who had built Carter Industries alongside him, was his own twin brother. And John had kept it from him for 3 decades. It doesn't make sense. Alex's voice was barely a whisper. His hands shook as he picked up one of the photos, his eyes drawn to the familiar lines of John's face. The likeness was undeniable now, but he couldn't reconcile it with everything he'd known. Why wouldn't he tell me? Sam leaned back in his chair, his sharp gaze assessing Alex carefully. It's possible he had his reasons. But if he's known all this time and kept it from you, well, that's a secret with some heavy weight behind it. Alex nodded, feeling a cold knot of dread in his stomach. Memories of his childhood flickered in his mind. The foster homes, the endless waiting, the stories he'd been told about his twin who was lost to the system. His adoptive parents had done their best, but he had always wondered about that missing part of himself, the brother he'd imagined growing up with. Yet here was John, a man who had been by his side for half his life, a man he'd trusted like family without realizing they shared the same blood. What do I do now? Alex murmured, staring out the window as dusk settled over the city. If he's kept this secret for so long, what else has he been hiding? That's what we need to find out, Sam replied, his voice steady. I'll keep looking into his activities, see if there's anything else suspicious. But Alex, he paused, his gaze steady, I think it's time you start facing him directly. Ask him the questions you need answers to. Alex left Sam's office feeling both stunned and determined. He drove aimlessly through the city, his thoughts spinning between shock, betrayal, and a strange, inexplicable hope. For years, he had carried a quiet grief for the brother he believed he'd lost forever. And yet, in one evening, he had both found and lost that same brother all over again. He returned to his penthouse as the city lights gleamed below him, the skyline a comforting yet distant familiarity. He poured himself a glass of scotch and sat down, staring into the amber liquid as if it held answers. The days that followed felt surreal as he grappled with his emotions and tried to keep up appearances at work. Seeing John each day, speaking to him in boardrooms, in elevators, and passing, it felt like walking on a wire above a yawning chasm. The following weekend, Alex arranged to meet with John under the pretense of discussing an upcoming acquisition. They met at Alex's favorite restaurant, a dimly lit, elegant place they'd frequented for years, and sat in a private booth where the clinking glasses and low murmur of other diners faded into the background. Alex felt a tightness in his chest as he watched John's familiar gestures, the easy way he settled into conversation, completely unaware of the storm that had taken over Alex's mind. As the waiter poured wine, Alex steeled himself. He cleared his throat, his tone casual but his heart pounding. "John, do you ever think about family? About where you come from?" John raised an eyebrow, his easy smile fading slightly. "Where's this coming from, Alex? We've got a business empire to run, and you're waxing poetic about roots?" "Humor me," Alex pressed, forcing a smile. "I mean, don't you ever wonder about who you were before?" John shrugged, glancing away as he sipped his wine. "Honestly, not really. You know, I was adopted at 10. It wasn't an easy childhood, but I made peace with it." Alex's stomach twisted. He could sense John pulling away, retreating into the familiar evasions he had come to recognize. But Alex wasn't willing to let it go. I found out recently that I had a twin," Alex continued, watching John closely. "A brother who was lost in the system. They told me he was gone, and I believed it. But now, I have reason to think he might be closer than I thought." John's hand froze on his wine glass. For a split second, a flash of something, guilt, fear, crossed his face before he masked it with a wry smile. "Alex," he chuckled, though his eyes held no amusement, "are you telling me you think I'm your long-lost brother? That's quite a leap, isn't it?" Alex's heart pounded as he leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Is it, though? I've seen pictures, John. I've done my research. It's not a theory. It's a fact." Silence settled between them, thick and uncomfortable. John's jaw tightened, and he looked down, avoiding Alex's gaze. "I don't know what you think you found, Alex," he said quietly, his voice steady but his eyes giving away the turmoil beneath. "But maybe it's better if you leave the past where it is." Alex's hand clenched into a fist beneath the table. "How could you do this, John? How could you keep it from me? 30 years. I thought you were my friend, my partner. All this time, you knew the truth, and you hid it from me." John's gaze met Alex's, sharp and defiant. "And what difference would it have made? We've built an empire together. What we have is solid, Alex. Business, wealth, things that matter. Blood doesn't change that. But it changes everything for me," Alex replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent my entire life wondering, searching for a family I thought I'd never find. And all this time, you've been right here, lying to me." John looked away, a shadow crossing his face. "I didn't lie to you," he muttered. "I just omitted things. And honestly, Alex, what difference does it make? Do you think knowing I'm your brother would change the way you feel about the company? About what we've accomplished?" "It would have changed everything," Alex replied, his tone firm. "And it still might. Because now I have to wonder. If you could keep this a secret, what else have you been hiding?" John's face went pale, his expression guarded as he processed Alex's words. The easy camaraderie, the decades of shared triumphs and struggles, it all felt hollow now, tainted by betrayal. Alex watched him, searching for the man he trusted implicitly, the partner who had stood beside him through every victory and defeat. But he saw only a stranger. Without another word, Alex stood, tossing money on the table to cover their drinks. As he turned to leave, he felt the weight of John's gaze on his back. He walked out of the restaurant, each step heavy with the realization that the foundations of his life had been irreparably cracked. Back in his car, Alex sat in silence, his mind reeling. The city lights blurred around him, the noise of the streets muffled as he struggled to process the depth of the betrayal. He didn't know where to go from here, but one thing was certain. He would need to look deeper, to uncover the truth not only about John's past but about what his partner might be hiding in the present. As he drove through the darkened streets, Alex resolved to have Sam dig even deeper. He needed answers, real answers, and this time, he would not stop until he had uncovered every secret his brother had buried. The following days were a blur of tension and silence, with Alex avoiding John whenever possible. At work, they kept up appearances, but Alex could see the cracks in their once unbreakable partnership widening with each strained interaction. Alex's mind buzzed with questions he couldn't silence. How long had John known? Why hadn't he said anything? And what else could he be hiding? The weight of these questions hung over him like a storm cloud. Unable to shake the feeling that there was more to the story, he called Sam. Look deeper into John's background, he told him. I need to know everything. Sam agreed without hesitation, assuring Alex that he'd leave no stone unturned. Alex leaned back in his chair after the call, his gaze drifting to a framed family photo on his desk. It showed him, his wife Anna, and their son Ben on a vacation in the mountains. But now, the photo only reminded him of the family he'd been denied for so long, the family John had chosen to keep hidden. That evening, Alex confided in Anna. Sitting together in the quiet of their living room, he told her everything. His discovery, John's silence, and his suspicions about what else John might be hiding. Anna listened with a supportive but worried look, her hand resting on his as he spoke. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Alex said, his voice tinged with disbelief. To think he knew all along and said nothing. Anna squeezed his hand gently. Maybe he was afraid, Alex. Maybe he thought you'd be angry, or that it would change everything between you. But he made that decision for me, Alex replied, frustration evident in his voice. I've always wondered about my past, about my brother, and he took that from me. Anna nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's clear there's a lot of pain here, Alex. But maybe there's more to the story than he's letting on. You should try talking to him again. If he's your brother, then you too deserve to know the full truth. As much as Alex hated to admit it, Anna was right. His confrontation with John had left him with more questions than answers. If he was going to make sense of this, he'd need to dig into his own past as well. The next day, Alex found himself reaching out to his former foster parents, the Thompsons. They had raised him from the age of 3 until he was adopted at 10. Though they were elderly now and living in a small town hours away, they agreed to meet him, eager to reconnect with the boy they had loved as their own. When Alex arrived at their home, memories flooded back, of warm hugs, of bedtime stories, of a sense of safety he'd rarely felt since leaving. The Thompsons greeted him warmly, ushering him into their cozy living room. After catching up on the years that had passed, he carefully steered the conversation toward his early childhood. I wanted to ask you about my family, Alex began hesitantly, his voice thick with emotion. I remember being told I had a twin, but I never knew what happened to him. Do you know anything about it? Mrs. Thompson's face softened, and she exchanged a somber glance with her husband. Oh, Alex, she said, her voice trembling slightly, you were so young when you came to us. We always knew you'd want answers someday. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and spoke quietly. We were told that you and your brother had been separated when your parents passed. They were well, it was tragic. You were both placed in foster care, but your brother was adopted quickly, almost immediately, while you stayed with us a little longer. Why? Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. We never knew the details, just that it happened suddenly. But we did hear whispers about your parents' background, rumors that they came from a wealthy family, a family with connections, Mr. Thompson replied, hesitating. There were things we weren't told, even back then. Alex's pulse quickened. What kind of connections? Mrs. Thompson shook her head. We don't know, dear. It was all so secretive. But when you were adopted, we always wondered if it was because they didn't want any trace of your past following you. Their words left Alex reeling. His parents, wealthy, connected, hiding something? The mystery of his family ran deeper than he had imagined. What secrets could have been so dangerous that they had to be buried, even at the cost of splitting up 2 young brothers? After a somber farewell, Alex left the Thompsons with a heavy heart. He felt a strange mix of sadness and anger as he drove home. All his life, he had been denied the truth, first by the system, then by John. He was more determined than ever to uncover the full story. When Sam called him that night, Alex answered eagerly. What did you find? He asked, his voice tense. Something unusual, Sam replied, his tone cautious. I went through John's background, as you asked. Everything checks out, on the surface. But I found something buried in his adoption records, details that were redacted, names withheld. Whoever adopted him didn't want to be connected to him publicly, almost as if they were hiding his identity. Alex's heart raced. And my parents? Did you find anything about them? Yes, Sam replied, his voice low. It wasn't easy to track, but I found mention of a Carter family estate, a property held by a trust with ties to old money. Your family's past is buried beneath layers of secrecy, Alex. But I think John's adoptive family knew exactly who he was, and they wanted him for a reason. Alex sank back in his chair, trying to process the revelations. Not only had his parents been connected to wealth, but they had ties deep enough to conceal John's adoption. Why would they go to such lengths? What kind of family had he really come from? There's more, Sam continued, his tone grim. I found records of a private trust, a financial entity that's been funding certain ventures over the years. It's tied to John, and now I realize it's tied to you too. What does that mean? Alex asked, his voice barely audible. It means John's been receiving money from a family fund, one that was set up years ago. It's as if he's been quietly reaping the benefits of an inheritance he knew you'd never get, Sam said. And with each year that passes, that fund grows. From what I can tell, John's used it as collateral to build his share in the company. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. So he's been using our inheritance to fund his part of Cartermatics, without telling me? It looks that way. And there's one more thing, Sam added. The trust fund is set to dissolve soon. At that point, all assets go to the named heir, and that heir is John. The magnitude of Sam's words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. Not only had John taken his birthright, but he had also hidden their connection to ensure he alone would benefit from it. The family wealth, the opportunities, the empire they had built together. All of it had been tainted by deception. Alex hung up, his mind whirling with anger, hurt, and betrayal. John hadn't just been hiding the truth of their bond. He had been using it, shaping their futures while ensuring that Alex would remain in the dark. For John, family had always been a game of strategy, a carefully crafted lie that kept him in power. But Alex had reached his limit. As he sat in the darkness, Alex's resolve hardened. It was time to confront John, not as a partner, but as the brother who had been denied his legacy. He would force John to face the truth, to account for every betrayal and buried secret. In the morning, Alex would begin a battle not just for his company, but for his past, his birthright, and the family he had been robbed of. And this time, he wouldn't rest until every one of John's secrets had been unearthed. The sun had barely risen when Alex arrived at the office, but he felt as though he'd been awake for days. The revelations from Sam weighed heavily on his mind, each piece of hidden history adding fuel to the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. He knew he needed answers directly from John, but his brother had proven himself a master at evasion. This time, Alex planned to use John's strategy against him. That morning, John arrived, whistling casually as he entered the office. The sight of him, unfazed, carrying on as if nothing had changed, sparked a fresh wave of frustration in Alex. He masked his feelings with a cool nod as he gestured for John to join him in his office. "Busy morning already?" John asked, easing into the chair across from Alex's desk. He looked at Alex with his usual smile, though Alex noticed the faintest flicker of tension in his eyes. "Always," Alex replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Actually, I've been thinking a lot about our future plans. We're looking to bring in investors for the European expansion, but I'm concerned about collateral and asset allocation. We need to review our finances closely, make sure we're in the clear." "Of course," John replied, his expression neutral but his posture stiffening slightly. "I'll make sure our accounts team gets everything together." "No," Alex said, fixing John with a hard stare. "I'd like you to go over it personally. You're as invested as I am in this, after all." John's smile faltered for just a second before he nodded. "Absolutely. I'll handle it." Alex watched him leave, his mind racing. If John was involved in their family's hidden trust, as Sam had suggested, it would be nearly impossible for him to untangle his finances from the companies without revealing the entire truth. Alex had put John in a corner, and now, all he had to do was wait. Later that day, Sam called, his voice tense. "Alex, I need you to come to my office. I found something else, something I think you'll want to see." 20 minutes later, Alex walked into Sam's office, where the investigator was waiting with a folder on his desk. Sam's face was drawn with the weight of what he was about to reveal, and Alex braced himself. Remember when I mentioned John's adoptive family? Sam began, opening the folder and sliding a document across the table. I managed to trace them back to a prestigious family, one with a significant presence in finance. They've been behind some large trust funds tied to sensitive legacies. Alex's eyes scanned the page, his heart pounding as he read the names, dates, and assets linked to the Maddox family. But it was the last line on the page that stopped him cold. The Maddox Carter Heir Fund. Beneficiaries, John Maddox and Alex Carter. This fund was set up after your parents died, Sam explained. It was meant for both you and John. But because John was adopted by the Maddox family, they had control of the assets and ensured that John would be the primary beneficiary. He's been managing this quietly, leveraging it into his share of the company. But officially, both of you have a claim to it. Alex's hand clenched around the paper. So John's known all along. He's known that we're brothers, that this fund was meant to be ours together, and he used it behind my back. More than that, Alex, Sam replied grimly. He's been orchestrating things to ensure you'd never find out. That fund was the foundation of his wealth, his way of stepping into your world. And if the fund dissolves as planned, he'll be the sole beneficiary, unless you make your claim first. The betrayal settled over Alex like a dark cloud. John had not only taken advantage of him, but had done so in a way that ensured Alex would remain in the dark forever. But now, with the truth at his fingertips, Alex knew he couldn't wait any longer. He needed to confront John and demand answers. The following evening, he arranged a meeting at his penthouse, a place where they could speak freely. John arrived, clearly suspicious, but masking it with his usual confidence. They sat across from each other in Alex's living room, the city lights casting long shadows across the space. "You wanted to talk?" John asked, leaning back casually. But there was a tightness around his mouth, a flicker of wariness in his eyes. "Yes, John," Alex replied, his voice steady but cold. "I wanted to discuss our history, our family history." John's expression remained composed, but Alex could see the strain in his posture. "We've been through this, Alex. I told you everything you need to know." "Did you?" Alex's voice was quiet, but laced with anger. "You didn't tell me about the trust fund, or that you knew we were brothers long before I ever found out. And you certainly didn't tell me that you used that inheritance to build your share of our company." John's face went pale, but he quickly recovered, his mouth curling into a bitter smile. "And who told you all of this? A private investigator, maybe? You couldn't come to me directly, so you had someone dig up dirt instead?" Alex's jaw clenched, but he held his ground. "Don't try to turn this around on me, John. You made a choice to keep me in the dark. You took our legacy and twisted it to your advantage. I trusted you, not just as a partner, but as my friend." John scoffed, his tone bitter. "Friend? You think friendship is what this was? Alex, I've spent my whole life watching you take everything I could never have. The wealth, the power, the prestige. I had to fight for everything I got. Do you really think I was just going to hand it over once I found out we were related?" Alex's fists clenched, his voice rising. "That wasn't your decision to make. I grew up in foster care, wondering if I had family out there, someone who would care. And all this time, you've been right here. You had the chance to tell me the truth, to build something together as brothers. But you threw that away." John's face twisted, his eyes cold and calculating. "Maybe because I learned a long time ago that family doesn't mean anything. Not when it comes to power. We were both abandoned, Alex, but I chose to do something about it. I took control of my fate. And if you had any sense, you'd have done the same." Alex's anger turned to disgust as he stared at the man he had once called a friend. "So that's it, then? You're willing to betray your own brother for money? For power?" John laughed bitterly. "Betrayal? I think you're overreacting. I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine. I simply ensured that I got what I deserved. And if you'd thought for one second that I would have shared it all just because we share the same blood, then you're more naive than I thought." Alex stood, his patience finally breaking. "This ends now, John. I'm making a formal claim to our family's trust, and I'll make sure everyone knows the truth about who you are, what you've done. If you're determined to treat this like a game, then you should know. I don't lose." John's smile faded, and he stood, his posture tense. You're making a mistake, Alex. One that could cost you more than you realize. Maybe, Alex replied, his voice cold, but I'd rather fight for what's rightfully mine than sit here and watch you manipulate everything I've worked for. For a long moment, they stood facing each other, a silent battle raging between them. Finally, John's gaze darkened, and he turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. Just as he reached the door, he paused, glancing back at Alex with a calculating look. "Fine, Alex," he said, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "If you want to fight, then that's what you'll get. But don't forget, I know you as well as you know yourself, and I'll use every weapon I have to win." With that, John walked out, leaving Alex alone with the realization that he had just declared war on his own brother. As the door closed, Alex felt a strange sense of relief. The mask was off, the truth laid bare. He no longer needed to pretend or to protect John's secrets. But he knew that this was only the beginning of a long and dangerous battle, one that would test not only his resolve but the very future of everything he had built. The fight for his family legacy had begun, and he was prepared to see it through to the bitter end. The days following Alex and John's confrontation passed in a tense blur, with the two men barely exchanging words. At work, they operated in an icy truce, both waiting for the other to make a move. Alex knew that John wouldn't take his threat lightly, but he was prepared to fight for the family legacy he'd been denied. He wasn't just battling for his inheritance now. He was fighting for the truth, for justice, and to reclaim the identity his brother had stolen. Meanwhile, Sam's investigation continued, uncovering pieces of a puzzle that grew more disturbing with each new detail. Alex received reports daily, each one hinting at a darker, more twisted side of his family's history. His parents' wealth, it seemed, had come at a steep cost, one mired in secrecy, scandal, and betrayal. One evening, as Alex sat in his office sifting through another set of reports from Sam, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. "Urgent. Found something big. Need you to meet me at the estate." Alex's heart skipped a beat. The estate Sam mentioned was the Carter family's long-abandoned mansion, a place Alex had only visited once as a child. Now, as he pulled up the long, tree-lined driveway in the growing dusk, a sense of foreboding settled over him. The mansion loomed in the distance, its once grand facade now shrouded in shadows and decay. Sam was waiting at the entrance, his face pale and his expression grave. He held a flashlight in one hand and a folder in the other. "What is it?" Alex asked, stepping out of his car. "What did you find?" Sam gestured for Alex to follow him. "There's something here you need to see. It's about your parents and John." They made their way into the mansion, the old floorboards creaking underfoot as they walked down dimly lit hallways. The air was thick with the scent of dust and mildew, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft hum of Sam's flashlight as he led them deeper into the house. Finally, they reached a room near the back of the estate. The door was slightly ajar, and Sam pushed it open, revealing a small, dusty study. Old documents, letters, and photographs lay scattered across a desk and the floor, as if someone had left in a hurry and never returned. Sam pointed to a collection of papers spread out on the desk. "These documents, they detail your parents' lives, their business dealings, and, most importantly, what happened after they passed away." Alex scanned the papers, his pulse racing as he took in the carefully documented details. His parents had indeed been wealthy, but their fortune hadn't come solely from legitimate business. There were deals with powerful, corrupt families, alliances that had kept their family's wealth secure but at the cost of their freedom. And when his parents died, it seemed that the Maddox family had taken advantage of the ensuing chaos to claim John, hiding his identity to secure control over the Carter legacy. According to these files, Sam continued, your parents' deaths might not have been an accident. There are mentions of disputes with their partners, debts left unpaid. It's possible they were eliminated. Alex felt a wave of nausea as he pieced together the implications. You're saying they were murdered? And that the Maddox family covered it up to take control of John and, eventually, the inheritance? Sam nodded grimly. It appears so. And from what I can tell, John's known about this for a long time. His adoptive family made sure he'd inherit the estate, and they kept you in the dark, likely to avoid sharing the wealth with you. Alex's mind reeled as he struggled to process the enormity of what Sam had uncovered. His entire life had been shaped by this deception, a carefully constructed lie meant to keep him from claiming what was rightfully his. And John, his own brother, had been complicit, knowing the truth and hiding it. But as he read through the documents, one line caught his eye, a detail that set his heart racing. Among the records of assets, there was mention of a fund set aside for the heir's child, a sum allocated not to Alex or John, but to a third person. Who is this meant for? Alex asked, pointing to the line. Sam's expression was unreadable. It's difficult to say, but from what I've gathered, it could mean that your parents had plans for a future generation, someone who would carry on the Carter name. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. Could there be another family member out there? Another secret that John had hidden from him? Just then, Sam's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. He glanced down, his face paling as he read the message. Alex, I think you should see this. He handed Alex the phone, and Alex's breath caught as he read the words on the screen. John Maddox spotted at Carter Estate. Not alone. A fresh wave of anger surged through him as he realized what this meant. John was at the estate, likely trying to cover his tracks or destroy evidence that could expose the full extent of his deception. Let's go, Alex said, his voice tight with fury. He turned on his heel and strode out of the room, Sam following close behind. As they moved through the mansion, the dim light from Sam's flashlight illuminated eerie shadows on the walls, casting a haunting glow over the decaying remnants of Alex's family history. Finally, they reached the grand staircase leading down to the mansion's lower levels, where they heard faint voices coming from one of the rooms. They approached slowly, and as they peered into the room, Alex's suspicions were confirmed. John stood in front of a fireplace, shoving papers into the flames. Beside him was a young woman, her face obscured by shadows, but she seemed anxious, glancing nervously between John and the burning documents. John! Alex's voice rang out, echoing through the room. He stepped forward, his face hardened with anger as he confronted his brother. What are you doing here? And what are you destroying? John froze, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. Alex, I didn't expect you here. Clearly, Alex replied, his tone cold. I'm done with your games, John. I know about the trust, the inheritance, and the fact that you've been lying to me all these years. And now I find you here, trying to destroy the last pieces of evidence? John's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. I'm not destroying anything, Alex. I'm protecting what's ours. Our? Alex scoffed. Since when did you care about our anything? You've spent our entire lives hiding the truth from me, taking what was mine, and leaving me in the dark. A tense silence settled between them as the flames crackled in the fireplace. Finally, the young woman beside John spoke up, her voice shaky but determined. You're Alex Carter? Alex turned to her, his anger momentarily giving way to confusion. And you are? She looked between the two brothers, uncertainty in her gaze. My name is Rachel. I've been looking for my father's family for years. My mother passed away when I was young, and all I had was a name. Carter. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The fund, the mention of the heir's child. Could it be? Rachel, you're saying you're connected to us? That you're a Carter? Yes, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. My mother. She always told me I had family out there, but I never knew how to find you. Alex turned to John, his expression darkening as realization dawned. You knew about her, didn't you? You knew there was another heir, someone who had a rightful claim, and you kept her hidden to keep everything for yourself? John's face was a mask of defiance. I did what I had to do. This family isn't about blood or sentiment, Alex. It's about power. Rachel's existence would have complicated everything. I was the one chosen to carry on the family's legacy. Not you. Not her. Alex's heart thundered with fury, his gaze fixed on his brother with a newfound sense of betrayal. He had been willing to fight for his inheritance, for the family name. But now, seeing the lengths John had gone to in order to control that legacy, he realized just how deeply the corruption ran. Stepping forward, he looked John squarely in the eye. You're wrong, John. This isn't just about power. It's about the truth, about family. You abandoned that the moment you put your greed above everything else. With a final, searing glare, Alex took Rachel by the hand, guiding her out of the room and away from the smoldering remains of John's lies. Behind them, John stood alone, watching as his carefully constructed empire began to crumble around him. The drive back from the Carter estate was silent, the weight of everything Alex had uncovered pressing down on him like an anchor. Beside him in the passenger seat, Rachel sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the passing lights of the city, lost in her own thoughts. He could barely believe it. This young woman was his niece, a part of the family he'd never known existed, hidden by John in his pursuit of control. And now, as the pieces fell together, Alex realized how deep his brother's betrayal truly ran. Back at his penthouse, Alex offered Rachel a seat and a glass of water. She looked at him, her face a mixture of sadness, hope, and trepidation. For her, meeting him was the culmination of a lifelong search for the family her mother had always spoken of, the family she dreamed about but never thought she'd actually find. "Rachel," Alex began, his voice gentle but strained, "I can't imagine what this has been like for you, but I need to understand. How did you find us? How did you know to look?" Rachel took a deep breath, steadying herself. "After my mom passed, I found some letters hidden away in her things. They were from your parents. They mentioned me, and they talked about you and John. She was afraid to tell me much, but she wanted me to know that I came from a family with a complicated past. All I had were names, but it was enough to start searching." Alex nodded, anger brewing in his chest as he realized the depths of his parents' secrets and John's efforts to keep Rachel hidden. And John, how did he come into this? Rachel's face tightened, her expression conflicted. "I didn't even know who he was when I reached out. I only had the name Carter to go by, and when I finally found John, he told me. He told me I had no other family left, that I was the last of us." Her voice cracked, and she looked down. "He said that you didn't want to know me, that I'd be better off keeping my distance." Alex felt a fresh wave of fury wash over him. "He lied to you, Rachel. He wanted you gone because he knew your claim to the Carter name would disrupt everything he'd worked for." Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes. "I think deep down I knew, but he was all I had. I thought I could trust him." Her words hung heavy in the air. For Rachel, John had been a lifeline, a connection to the family she'd always yearned to know. But for Alex, John's actions were the final betrayal, a testament to the fact that his brother would stop at nothing to preserve his version of the Carter legacy. As they sat in silence, Alex's phone buzzed with a call from Sam. He answered, his voice tight. "Sam, I hope you have good news." "Not exactly," Sam replied. "I think you should come down to the office. I've been reviewing John's records again, and there's something concerning. It looks like he's made moves to secure assets under his sole control. If he finishes what he started, he'll have full ownership of everything left in the Carter Trust." The news sent a chill through Alex. John wasn't just content to hide his secrets. He was preparing to take every last piece of the family fortune, leaving Alex and Rachel with nothing. "We'll be there soon," Alex replied, his voice hardening with determination. He turned to Rachel, a fire igniting in his gaze. "I need you to come with me, Rachel. We have to confront this, once and for all." She nodded, a flicker of resolve shining in her eyes. "I've waited my whole life to meet my family. I'm not letting him take it away from me now." When they arrived at Sam's office, he greeted them with a solemn expression. On his desk were stacks of papers, financial records, and legal documents, all pointing to John's methodical dismantling of the Carter assets. Sam began explaining how John had transferred shares, secured accounts, and quietly siphoned funds from the family trust into accounts that were solely in his name. Based on these documents, Sam explained, John has built himself a legal wall. If he finalizes these transfers, the Carter fortune will be fully under his control. Even your claim as heirs would be severely compromised, if not impossible to pursue. Alex gritted his teeth, struggling to keep his anger in check. "So, all this time, he's been planning to wipe me out. Wipe us out," he added, glancing at Rachel. "And he nearly succeeded." Sam nodded grimly. "He's covered his tracks well, but we have one advantage. He hasn't completed the process yet. There's a small window, Alex. If you make a formal claim as an heir, it could force him to stop, or at least slow down. Alex turned to Rachel. We'll do this together. If John has spent his life manipulating our family, then it's time we finally stop him. Rachel's eyes shone with determination. I'm ready. The next morning, Alex and Rachel arrived at the Carter-Maddox headquarters, where John was holding a high-stakes meeting with key stakeholders. They entered the boardroom just as John was launching into a pitch about the company's European expansion. His face tightened when he saw them, but he quickly masked his surprise with a forced smile. Alex, Rachel, he said, feigning politeness. What a surprise. We're in the middle of a very important meeting. Forward, his voice steady but firm. You didn't build anything, John. You took advantage of our family's legacy, exploited every connection, and manipulated everyone around you for your own gain. And now, I have the evidence to prove it. John's expression darkened, a flicker of fear flashing in his eyes before he masked it with defiance. Evidence? You think anyone will believe you? You've already tarnished this family with your sanctimonious crusade. But I'm the only one who has the strength to preserve our legacy. Preserve it? Alex shot back, his voice rising. You've done nothing but destroy it. You tried to erase me, erase Rachel, all for the sake of control. But you've lost, John. It's over. John's composure cracked, his hands clenching into fists as he glared at Alex. You don't understand, Alex. I was meant to inherit it all. I've sacrificed everything to secure this family's place at the top. And if you think I'm going to let you take it from me, you already have nothing left to take, John, Alex interrupted, his tone cold. The court has stripped you of your authority, your assets are frozen, and the entire board knows about your deceit. You're finished. John's face twisted with rage, and for a moment, Alex feared he might lash out. But instead, John let out a bitter laugh, a hollow sound that echoed through the room. You think you've won, don't you? He sneered. You may have the title, the money, the family name, but in the end, you'll realize that none of it matters. Power isn't something you inherit, it's something you take. And without me, you're nothing. Alex held his ground, refusing to be rattled by John's taunts. That's where you're wrong, John. Real power doesn't come from lies and manipulation. It comes from integrity, from building something that lasts. John's sneer deepened, his eyes flashing with hatred. You're a fool, Alex. A naive, pathetic fool. And one day, you'll regret this. With that, he stood abruptly, storming out of the restaurant without another word. Alex watched him go, a sense of finality settling over him. The brother he had once trusted was gone, replaced by a man driven by ambition and hatred. But as painful as it was, he knew he had made the right choice. Rachel approached him, her expression filled with relief and empathy. It's over, Alex. You've done everything you could. Alex nodded, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. Yes, it's over. But in his heart, he knew that while the battle for the family legacy was finished, the scars would remain. As they left the restaurant together, Alex felt the weight of the past finally begin to lift. The journey had been brutal, tearing apart the illusion of family and exposing the darkest truths of their legacy. But through it all, he had found something far more valuable than wealth or power. He had found the strength to rebuild, to forge a future based on trust and honesty. And though John's shadow would linger, Alex knew that he and Rachel were finally free. The months that followed were a whirlwind of rebuilding and healing. Alex and Rachel threw themselves into the company, determined to reshape Carter-Maddox into a business that reflected their vision and values, not John's ruthless ambition. With John's influence removed, the atmosphere at the company shifted. Employees seemed more relaxed, the board meetings lost their tension, and there was a renewed sense of unity. But John's absence cast a bittersweet shadow over everything. For all his betrayals, he had still been Alex's brother, the person who had shared his early dreams and ambitions. Even as Alex steered the company into a new era, he couldn't shake the feeling of loss that lingered, a sense of mourning for the brother he once thought he knew. One afternoon, as Alex sat in his office, sifting through old files, Rachel knocked on his door, holding a small stack of letters bound together with a faded ribbon. I found these in the archives, she said, handing them to him. They're letters from our parents, written to each other and to us. Alex's chest tightened as he took the bundle, tracing his fingers over the worn paper. He untied the ribbon and began reading, his heart aching with every line. The letters painted a picture of parents who had faced their own battles, caught between loyalty to their family and the powerful forces surrounding their legacy. They spoke of their hopes for him and John, their dreams of a future where both brothers would carry on the family name with honor. But as Alex read, one letter stood out. Written shortly before their parents' deaths, it was a heartfelt message from his mother to his father, expressing her fears for their sons' futures. I worry about John, she wrote. He's grown so ambitious, so focused on what we have rather than who we are. I fear that in protecting our legacy, we may have planted a seed of greed in him. I pray he finds his way, that he learns the value of family beyond wealth. And I hope Alex will have the strength to guide him, even if it means standing up to him someday. Alex read the words with a mix of sadness and understanding. His mother had seen the darkness in John even then, sensed the ambition that would one day tear them apart. But she had also believed in Alex's strength, in his ability to steer the family's future with integrity. Rachel watched him, her eyes filled with compassion. They had such high hopes for you both, she said softly. They wanted you to be more than just heirs to a fortune. They wanted you to be family. Alex nodded, closing the letter carefully. They did. And I think maybe it's not too late to honor that. He met Rachel's gaze, determination shining in his eyes. We can still change things. We can build something meaningful, something that isn't just about money and power. We can honor our parents' vision and create a legacy worth passing on. Rachel's face broke into a smile. I believe in that too, Alex. And I know we can do it together. With newfound resolve, they set to work, implementing changes that redefined Carter-Maddox from the inside out. They established ethical initiatives, prioritized employee well-being, and invested in projects that focused on giving back to the community. They brought in fresh talent and built a culture of openness and transparency, shedding the secrecy and mistrust that had tainted the company under John's rule. One evening, months after they had begun transforming the company, Alex received a letter with no return address. He opened it cautiously, his heart pounding as he recognized the handwriting, John's. The letter was short, filled with bitterness, but also a strange sense of resignation. Congratulations, Alex. You got what you wanted, everything, just like always. I wonder if you'll ever understand what it feels like to be on the other side, to have nothing, but enjoy it while it lasts. Power has a way of slipping through your fingers when you least expect it. You'll see. Alex read the words with a mixture of sorrow and frustration. John was still consumed by resentment, unwilling to see that his downfall had been of his own making. But beneath the bitterness, Alex sensed something deeper, a hint of regret, perhaps even a shadow of the brother he had once known. He folded the letter carefully, tucking it away in his desk. John's words, though harsh, reminded him of how far he had come and how important it was to hold on to the values he and Rachel had fought to instill in the company. As the months passed, Carter-Maddox continued to thrive. Under Alex and Rachel's leadership, the company expanded into new markets and earned a reputation as an ethical and innovative force in the industry. Employees who had once feared the ruthless tactics of John's regime now felt a renewed sense of purpose, and even the board members embraced the changes Alex and Rachel had introduced. One day, Alex received a message from his assistant. "There's someone here to see you, Mr. Carter. She says it's a personal matter." Curious, Alex asked the assistant to send the visitor in. Moments later, a woman entered his office, her face familiar yet older, with the lines of someone who had lived a difficult life. She introduced herself as a former employee of the estate, one who had served under John during his tenure. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she began, her voice soft but firm. "But I thought you should know the truth about your brother." Alex's heart sank, wary of yet another secret waiting to be uncovered. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone cautious. The woman took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "I was one of the few people John trusted. He often spoke about you, about how you'd taken everything he believed should be his. But he also confided something else, something that made me realize he was haunted by his own actions. She paused, her eyes reflecting a strange sadness. John loved this family, Mr. Carter, more than he ever let on, but he could never admit it to himself. His ambition was his way of trying to prove himself, to escape the feeling of being this second son. He didn't know how to ask for forgiveness, and by the time he realized it, it was too late. Alex felt a knot of emotion rise in his throat. John's ambition had consumed him, but beneath it all, he had been driven by a desire for validation, for acceptance that he had never known how to express. He would never admit it, the woman continued, but I think part of him hoped that you would save him, that you'd be strong enough to stop him from going too far. Alex nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling over him. Thank you, he said quietly, for telling me this. As the woman left, Alex sat in silence, grappling with a mix of emotions. For so long, he had seen John as an adversary, a betrayer of everything their family stood for. But now, he saw him as something else, a man trapped by his own fears and insecurities, a brother who had never truly felt at home in his own family. That evening, Alex sat alone, reading through his parents' letters once more. The words spoke of love, of hopes and dreams for a future that had never come to pass. They reminded him that family, despite its flaws, was a bond that could not be erased. And though John's actions had been unforgivable, Alex felt a quiet sense of forgiveness, an understanding of the pain his brother had carried. The next day, Alex visited the Carter estate for the first time since the court battles had ended. As he walked through the empty halls, he could feel the weight of history around him. Generations of Carters who had built, fought, and sacrificed to create the legacy he now held. He stopped in front of a large portrait of his parents, their faces kind yet determined. "I hope I've made you proud," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm doing my best to honor what you built. For all of us." Leaving the mansion, Alex felt a sense of closure he hadn't known he needed. The battle for the Carter legacy had been hard won, but now, he was ready to move forward, to build something lasting and meaningful with Rachel by his side. In the weeks that followed, Alex and Rachel finalized the restructuring of Cartermatics, incorporating the ethical standards and values they had worked so hard to establish. They expanded their philanthropic efforts, supporting causes that aligned with their vision and giving back to the communities that had supported them. And though John's shadow lingered in Alex's heart, it no longer haunted him. He had reclaimed the family legacy, not just for himself, but for future generations, ensuring that the Carters would be remembered not for their wealth, but for the values that defined them. In the end, Alex knew that his parents' dream had finally been fulfilled. And with Rachel by his side, he looked forward to a future where the Carter name would stand for something greater than power. Something true, enduring, and filled with hope. 1 year later, Cartermatics had transformed into a company that Alex could be proud of. The journey had been long and difficult, but Alex and Rachel had emerged stronger, bound by a shared vision and a commitment to honoring the true legacy of their family. The changes they had implemented, ethical initiatives, fair employment practices, and community outreach, had given Cartermatics a reputation that went beyond profits. Now, it was known as a company that valued integrity as much as success. The day began like any other, with Alex and Rachel working side by side in the executive offices. But there was an air of excitement in the company that morning. Cartermatics had just announced a partnership with a global environmental organization, pledging millions to support sustainable energy initiatives and environmental education. For Alex, it was a culmination of his and Rachel's efforts to shape the company into a force for good. As they reviewed the latest project updates, Rachel's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "I think our parents would have been proud of what we're doing," she said, glancing at Alex with a warm smile. "I know I am." Alex nodded, gratitude filling his heart. "I am too. And I know we're finally doing something that reflects who we are, not just as Carters, but as people." Just as they were wrapping up their meeting, Alex's assistant knocked on the door, a serious look on her face. "Mr. Carter, there's someone here to see you." "Who is it?" Alex asked, surprised by the interruption. "It's John Maddox," she replied, her voice low. Rachel's face tensed, and Alex felt a surge of old emotions rise within him. He hadn't seen or spoken to John since their last encounter at the restaurant. But despite everything, some part of him had always wondered if they would meet again. Now, it seemed that time had come. He took a steadying breath and looked at Rachel, who gave him a nod of encouragement. "Send him in." Moments later, John walked into the office. He looked different, older, more worn, with a resigned expression that Alex had never seen before. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a quiet bitterness that hung over him like a shadow. John gave a slight nod, acknowledging both Alex and Rachel. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, his voice subdued. Alex nodded, studying his brother. "What brings you here, John?" John glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on the portraits of their parents on the wall, the symbols of the legacy he had once fought so hard to control. He took a deep breath before speaking. "I've lost everything, Alex," he said, his tone edged with regret. "The court battles, the debts, the reputational damage. I have nothing left." He paused, his eyes shifting to Rachel. "And I realize now that I can't undo what I've done. But I came here to apologize." Silence filled the room, and Alex felt a mixture of emotions: anger, sadness, and, surprisingly, a touch of empathy. He'd spent years battling John, unraveling the web of lies and betrayal that had torn their family apart. But now, standing before him was not the ruthless man he'd fought, but a brother stripped of his defenses. "I'm not here to make excuses," John continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know what I did to both of you, to this family. I thought I was fighting for something that belonged to me. But I see now that I destroyed everything that mattered in the process." Rachel watched him, her face softening as she sensed his sincerity. She glanced at Alex, giving him a gentle nod of understanding. "John," Alex said, his voice steady, "I appreciate that you came here today, but apologies alone can't undo the damage. The family legacy isn't just about wealth or power. It's about values, trust, and building something that lasts beyond us." John looked away, shame flickering across his face. "I know," he murmured. "I thought that by controlling the family's wealth, I'd finally feel worthy. But all I did was destroy any chance of truly being part of this family." Alex took a deep breath, his gaze softening. "There's still time, John. Maybe not to undo everything, but to start again. It's not too late to make things right, if you're willing to change." For a moment, John looked as though he might break down. But he nodded, a faint glimmer of hope appearing in his eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll try. I want to be part of this family again, even if it means starting from scratch." Alex held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, John took it. It was a tentative gesture, but it symbolized something far more profound: a chance to rebuild what had been lost, not through power struggles or control, but through genuine connection. Rachel stepped forward, joining them. "The past is behind us," she said, her voice warm. "We can only move forward from here." Over the next few months, John worked alongside Alex and Rachel, starting at the bottom and learning about the new values guiding Cartermatics. He volunteered his time on company initiatives, attended staff meetings, and slowly began to rebuild relationships with the people he had alienated. It wasn't an easy road, and he faced skepticism and mistrust. But gradually, John showed a willingness to change, a determination to prove himself as more than just a man defined by ambition. Meanwhile, Alex and Rachel continued their work, expanding the company's initiatives to include mentorship programs, environmental sustainability efforts, and community outreach. They partnered with nonprofit organizations, invested in renewable energy, and even established a scholarship fund in honor of their parents, dedicated to young people from underserved communities who showed promise in business and leadership. One evening, as they wrapped up a meeting with the board, Alex received an invitation to speak at a charity event honoring family-owned businesses that prioritized social responsibility. He accepted the invitation, feeling honored to represent the legacy he and Rachel had worked so hard to rebuild. The night of the event, Alex took the stage, the lights bright as he looked out over the crowd. Rachel and John sat in the front row, both watching him with pride. He cleared his throat, the words he had prepared seeming to resonate even more deeply now. "Building a legacy isn't just about wealth or power," he began. It's about integrity, trust, and a commitment to something greater than ourselves. For too long, my family's legacy was defined by secrecy, ambition, and conflict. But over the past year, we've worked to change that, to create something that isn't just about what we can gain, but what we can give back. He paused, glancing at Rachel and John. True legacy is built on honesty and resilience, and on lifting others up. It's about creating a foundation that future generations can stand on, one that reflects who we truly are, not just what we have. The audience erupted in applause, and as Alex stepped off the stage, he was greeted by a sea of faces, people who believed in the vision he and Rachel had created, people who had witnessed the transformation of Cartermatics from a company of power to one of purpose. As the evening wound down, Alex, Rachel, and John stood together, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. John looked at his siblings, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I never thought I'd be here," he admitted quietly. "Standing with you both, part of something real. I can't thank you enough for giving me this chance." Rachel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're family, John. We may have taken a long, difficult road to get here, but that's what makes this moment worth it." Alex nodded, feeling a profound sense of closure. The bitterness, the betrayals, and the pain had not vanished overnight, but they had given way to something stronger: hope. Together, they had rebuilt a legacy, not through wealth or control, but through forgiveness and unity. As they left the event, Alex felt the weight of the past finally lift, replaced by the promise of a future built on trust and integrity. The Carter legacy, once tainted by secrecy and ambition, had been reborn into something meaningful and enduring, a legacy of hope, of resilience, and of family. And as Alex walked into that future, his family by his side, he knew that they had truly created something worth leaving behind.